Hello students, today we are going to talk about the trait theories of personality, and the objectives for today's discussion will be to understand the conceptual framework of trait, to discuss the Allport's trait approach to personality, to have a look over the Cattell's 16 PF, and lastly we will come to know the basic dimensions of personality put forth by Eysenck. First of all, let us try to understand what personality means. Psychologists regard personality as a person's unique pattern of thinking, emotions and behavior. It is the special blend of talent, values, hopes, loves, hates and habits that makes each of us a unique person. It is a term not only to describe an individual's reputation, the way the person acts and is known socially, but also the internal processes that creates that reputation. So, personality refers to the enduring pattern of thoughts, feelings, motivation and behavior that are expressed in different circumstances. We use the idea of trait every day to talk about personality. For instance, our friend Akram is sociable, orderly and intelligent. His sister Nasreen is shy, sensitive and creative. In general, personality traits like these are stable qualities that a person shows in most of the situations. Typically, traits are inferred from behavior. If you see Akram talking to strangers, first at a supermarket and later at a party, you might deduce that he is sociable. Once personality traits are identified, they can be used to predict future behavior. For example, noticing that Akram is outgoing might lead you to predict that he will be sociable at school or at work. In fact, such consistency can span many years. According to Allport, who developed the trait approach to personality, the concept of trait has two separate but complementary meanings. On the one hand, a trait is an observed tendency to behave in a particular way, and on the other, a trait is an inferred or hypothesized underlying personality disposition that generates such behavioral tendency. Presumably, a tendency to be cheerful stems from an enduring pattern of internal processes, such as a tendency to experience positive effect, to think positive thoughts, or to wish to be perceived as happy. Traits are emotional, cognitive, and behavioral tendencies that constitute underlying personality dimensions on which individuals vary. Now, dear students, let us talk about the Allport's theory of personality. G.W. Allport was the first personality theorist who adopted trait approach in providing a theory of personality. He was the first theorist who, by rejecting the notion of a relatively limited number of personality types, adopted the trait approach for the description of highly individualized personalities. Traits, according to Allport, are the basic units of personality. Each of us develop a unique set of such organized tendencies termed as traits in the course of our continuous and gradual development. Allport tried to search these basic units of human behavior. The problem before him was to decide the number of personality traits representing the human behavior in its totality. He, along with one of his colleagues, listed 17,953 words in English language with the help of available dictionaries for the description of the personality or behavior of human beings. After analysis and rejection of the words on the basis of synonym and inappropriateness, he arrived at 4,541 words for classifying these into three main types, named as cardinal traits, central traits, and secondary traits. Cardinal traits are the primary traits so dominant in one's personal disposition that they color virtually every aspect of one's behavior and attributes. They are the most active and dominant traits of one's personality. Although present in a very small number of one or two, these are enough to influence the personality according to their characteristics. As an example, we can cite sense of humor as a cardinal trait in one's personality. This trait may color a person's personality in a specific way, so much so that he may be identified or known through his behavior, almost dominated by the sense of humor at all the times and occasions. Central traits. Central traits are those traits that are frequently employed for identifying and describing one's personality. They represent those few characteristic tendencies which can be ordinarily used to describe a person. For example, honesty, kindness, shyness, rigidity, cruelty, timidity, etc. Usually, 7 or 8 such traits are enough for knowing and describing the personality of an individual. Secondary traits are not as dominant as the cardinal or central traits. They are those traits of an individual's personality that play quite a secondary and insignificant role in the identification and description of one's personality. These are in fact not the essential part of one's personality. That's why these are reflected quite rarely in one's behavior, like a person named as miser, selfish, greedy, etc. So, according to Allport, one's cardinal traits, along with a few selected central traits, may play a dominant and significant role in the proper identification of one's personality from others. The rest of the central traits, along with a few secondary traits, can then make a group of common traits which are generally found in most of the people. Hence, in the task of identification, naming and describing the individuals on the basis of their personality characteristics or traits, we should mainly take into account the cardinal and central traits present in their behavior. Dear students, let us comment upon the Allport's concept of personality. In 1973, Gordon Allport, the first American-born personality theorist, reviewed the history of the word personality, beginning with its ties to the Latin word persona, which means mask. He then reviewed 50 definitions of personality before arriving at his own new famous definition in his 1973 book, Personality, A Psychological Interpretation. Personality is the dynamic organization within the individual of those psychophysical systems that determine his unique adjustment to his environment. In 1961, Allport changed the phrase unique adjustment to his environment to the characteristic behavior and thought. Key components in the definition are dynamic organization, psychophysical systems, determine and characteristic behavior and thought. Now, let us explain them one by one. First, dynamic organization. Personality, though always organized, is constantly changing or dynamic. Personality has organization and continuity within the person, but it is constantly changing or becoming something different. Psychophysical systems. The term psychophysical systems reminds us personality is neither exclusively mental nor exclusively neural. The organization entails the organization of both body and mind, inextricably fused into a personal unit. Determine. According to Allport, personality is not an abstract or a convenient fiction. It actually exists. A person is by no means simply a passive reactor to the environment. Rather, a person's behavior is generated from within by the personality structure. Characteristic behavior and thoughts. The phrase characteristic behavior and thought emphasize the importance of individuality. No two humans are alike. Every individual has characteristic behavior and thought. Therefore, the only way to learn about a particular person is to study that particular person. Now, dear students, let's have a look over the Cattell's 16 trait dimensions. As we know that Gordon Allport made the first comprehensive attempt to develop a framework to describe personality using traits. Allport and Odbert used Webster's New International Dictionary to identify terms that describe personality. This work was further developed by Raymond Cattell, a British-born American researcher. He has defined a trait as a structure of the personality inferred from behavior in different situations. He used a statistical procedure called factor analysis to determine the structure of personality. Factor analysis is a tool for summarizing the relationship among sets of variables by identifying those that co-vary and are different from other groups of variables. In personality theory, factor analysis can be used to identify which set of variables most simply and accurately reflect the structure of human personality. Cattell began by measuring visible features of personality, which he called surface traits. Soon, Cattell noticed that these surface traits often appear together in groups and can be recognized by manifestation of behavior like curiosity, dependability, and tactfulness. In fact, some traits appear together so often that they seem to represent a single more basic trait. Cattell called these deeper characteristics as source traits. They are the core of each individual's personality. Source traits are the underlying structures or sources that determine behavior such as dominance, submission, emotionality, etc. The traits found widely distributed in general population like honesty, aggression, and cooperation were termed as common traits. Unique traits are unique to a person, such as temperamental traits, emotional reactions, etc. Allport classified traits subjectively, and it is possible that he was wrong at times. Cattell used a statistical technique called factor analysis to look for connection among traits. For example, he found that imaginative people are almost always curious, creative, innovative, and ingenious. Thus, to be imaginative is a source trait. If you are an imaginative person, we automatically know that you have several other traits too. Cattell's subsequent investigation yielded 3 types of data, which he categorized as follows. Number 1, L data pertains to life record data, in which personality assessment occurs through interpretation of actual records of behavior throughout a person's lifetime. For example, report cards, ratings by friends, etc. Number 2, Q data. This pertains to the data obtained by questionnaire, for example, asking people to rate themselves on different characteristics. And the third, T data, which is all about an objective psychometric test data, for example, the thematic apperception test. Further developments in Cattell's trait approach. Further research in the field trait conception of the personality have highlighted the reception and similarity of the terms used by Cattell for describing human behavior in terms of 16 dimensions. For example, there stands much similarity and high correlation between the traits represented by factor 1, reserved versus outgoing, and 16, relaxed via tense, and also by factor 3, which is affected by feelings versus emotionally stable, and 7, timid versus venturesome. An individual who is calm is automatically relaxed, and one who is tense can be described as emotional or easily upset. Similarly, someone who is shy and timid can be described as reserved or unfriendly, and an outgoing friendly personality will be also found venturesome. Therefore, the latest research have been able to reduce the number of traits as well as the number of dimensions for describing personality. Eysenck's theory of personality. Hans Eysenck was a contemporary of Cattell and also used factor analysis to classify personality traits. But Eysenck began with a theory of personality which he based on 2 super traits, extroversion, introversion, and neuroticism, stability, while Cattell tried to give dimensions to personality by giving traits. Eysenck gave it more specification by grouping traits into definite types. How the individual behavior is organized and gets the shape of a definite type is revealed in this figure. Now, dear students, let us talk about the levels of behavior organization. We have 4 levels of behavior organization. At the lowest level, we have specific reasons They grow out of a particular responses to a single act. For example, blushing is a specific response. And at the second level, we have habitual response. If the individual reacts in the similar way, when the same situation reoccurs, we get habitual responses. Example of such habitual responses are not easily making friends, hesitant to talk to strangers, etc. are habitual responses. At the third level, we have organization of habitual acts into traits. Similar behavior acts are said to belong to one group called trait. In the above example, the habitual responses like A and B give birth to a group of traits called shyness. At the fourth level, we have organization of these traits into a general type. A type is defined as a group to correlated traits. The traits which are similar in nature give birth to a definite type. The traits like persistence, rigidity, shyness have been grouped into a type which is called introversion. Now at this final stage, ultimately we obtain a definite type. A person now can be classified as introvert if he has traits as described at level 3, habits and habit system as described at level 2, and response specifically are described at level 1. Eysenck has given the 4 distinct types. One is introversion, second is extroversion, third is neuroticism, and fourth is psychoticism. Number 1, introversion. Introversion, extroversion is a general factor according to Eysenck. People differ in the introversion-extroversion dimension. Traits of an introvert are excessive tiredness, constant introspection, feeling of guilt, and an over-concern with religious and ethical matters. He is less easily aroused, but his feelings are much more enduring and he has deeper attachment with others. He is less ambitious and less interested in material things. He is serious-minded and likes an ordered life. Extroversion. Extroverts are impulsive, changeable, irresponsible, and lacking in moral fiber. They value the outer world and their energies are directed outwards. They are active and sociable. They lose their temper quickly, but their feelings, unlike still waters, do not run deep. Superego seems strong in case of introverts, but it appears to be dominant in the case of extroverts. Neuroticism. The another major dimension involves emotional instability at the lower end and emotional stability at the upper end, describing people as neurotic and not neurotic dimension is psychotic. Neuroticism is considered a general factor by Eysenck. Traits of a neurotic person are below average intelligence, will, emotional control, sensory acuity, and capacity to exert himself. He is suggestible, lacks persistence, slow thought and action, and unsociable. Perhaps hereditary factors play a more important role in the development of this type. On the other hand, emotionally stable person is calm, even-tempered, carefree, and thoroughly reliable. Psychoticism. Psychoticism was identified as a general factor in addition to introversion and extroversion. Neuroticism and psychoticism were reported to be different in symptoms. In neurosis, psychological factors are primary and hereditary, and neurological factors may or may not be important. While in psychosis, hereditary and neurological factors are determining ones, and psychological factors are secondary. Traits of psychotic person are: psychotic person is less fluent, performs poorly, more undecided with respect to social attitudes, poor in his concentration, memory, and reading, tends to make larger movements. Like Cattell, Eysenck developed a questionnaire designed to measure his super traits, the Eysenck Personality Questionnaire, or EPQ, Eysenck and Eysenck 1975. Criticism of trait theory. There is no agreement among the psychologists as regards the use of the terms. There is a view that a trait is a behavioral disposition which is consistent and does not vary from situation to situation. Another difficulty is the quantification of human traits, because there is no zero reference and equality of units in trait measurement. Halo effect operates when a person rates an individual very high on a specific trait. He may rate the same person on the other trait equally high. Behavior of an individual cannot be predicted on the basis of scores on trait inventory. The last criticism against trait theory is whether a trait is viewed as an inner process which causes differences among the individuals. Dear students, we will conclude with that trait approach attempts to identify primary characteristics of people. A trait is considered as a relatively enduring attribute or quality on which one individual differs from another. They include a range of possible behaviors that are activated according to the demands of the situation. A number of psychologists like Allport, Cattell, Eysenck have used traits to formulate their theories of personality. With this, we conclude. I hope you have enjoyed and understood. Goodbye.